Alright guys, so this is how much food should I feed my fish. This is a 29-gallon tank. There are I believe there are three or four bronze Cory, 2 little babies that they just had. There are 3 of the zebra-esque Cory, I forget their name, but you can see one there. Here's one, the little baby. There are about 9 tetra of the neon variety. There's cardinal and neon. There's 5 black tetra and about 8 or 9 red-eye tetra. There's like 6 very small guppies, including the 2 big ones there. There's some baby kind of younger ones here. And there's a Pletko, I believe a bristlenose Pletko was what I was sold, but I'm skeptical. A bunch of shrimp, and a bunch of snails. And the tank is fairly well planted. They're not, like massive growth, but there's definitely some plant activity in the tank. And I have my under gravel is connected to the 207, and then I'm running a 350 Magnan part-time. So it's got really good filtration. So there is a capacity for the tank to absorb a little bit of overfeeding between the bottom feeders and the shrimp and the snails. The tank can absorb some excess food without it rotting on the bottom. And so I can kind of sort of overfeed this tank. And when I mean overfeed it, I mean like I'm gonna show you how much food I'm talking about. Now, they're not getting a lot of food in this tank without me feeding them. There is algae. I don't think there's much else. They're not eating the shrimp. They may be eating some young, but that's not happening on a basis where they are actually being, given an alternative diet that way. So whatever the food I'm putting in is basically what they have available to them. I'm thinking if they were, really hungry, they could potentially get some of the algae, but they're maybe not in tune with doing that, don't want to do that, or what is available really isn't sufficient for their needs. But in that sense, they may not starve if I miss a day or two. They have things to maybe pick at if they're so hungry that they're gonna switch their diet, to something that they're not familiar with. I don't think they're really familiar with eating from the tank, and they may learn that, but I just don't know at what cost, right? Anyway, so now if you look at the food container, you'll notice the weight is really tiny. This is called 1 ounce, and this is about a finger's length tall. So it's not a terribly small can, but 1 ounce is a tiny amount of food. And this thing will last months and months and months and months. Not to mention that I have, basically a lifetime. So like, you should never buy a container this big for this many fish, unless you just never want to run out of food, because this would last probably the lifetime of these fish, right? Like, that is a tremendous amount of food. If it's not lasting that long, then you probably are overfeeding, in combination with all your other, bottom sinking wafers. There's different kinds of worms. Now, you could feed 1 cube, put it in the tank, and use your fingers to break it up, and that would be a meal. Not that they would all love eating it, not all of them love eating it, but that's technically a meal for all these fish for at least, half the day. And then a pinch of a finger pinch of this is another meal. And so really you can get away with maybe 3 pinches of a flake food. Sorry guys. I'm just trying to show you like measure this out. That's a pinch. And that's like a medium-sized pinch for like breakfast, let's say, right? And then you can do, and you'll have to break this up because they're not, you know, they're, once they start tasting different foods, they're gonna have different diets. You could do 1 cube, could be another, that could be lunch, let's just say. And then maybe later on, oh, and then just to make sure that some of it is sinking, you're gonna do, because some of that food will sink, but most of that won't make it down to the bottom for the bottom feeders. And then this will though. So, you know, you're sinking granules. Now this is a healthy pinch because I have a lot of Cory, I have a lot of Pleco, and hopefully some of the fish will get it along the way. Now this is a full day, give or take. Now you can give less and you can give more, but like on average, this would be a good meal for the day for this whole tank. So if you're feeding dramatically more than this, you might want to rethink your, oh, and I'm sorry. And not all the time, maybe two out of 3 days, you know, I'll do one of these for the bottom feeders. That'll expand, they'll work at it. And if you did, what I would do is I would do 2 every other day. So you could do 1 every day, or you can wait off and let them pick up. Because the thing is, if you put too much of this down, you're gonna start getting fat bottom fish, because they will start to get whatever the school doesn't get on its way down. They'll actually get all that. And then if you're giving them this, they may be getting all of that because they just may not eat very much for whatever reason, timing, whatever. And the vast majority of this can actually find its way to the bottom. So depending on what's making it to the bottom, you'll then supplement your bottom feeders, because this will only feed the bottom feeders for the most part. Some mollies will eat from the bottom and stuff like that, but this is mostly for the bottom feeders. And so this is what you can guarantee the bottom feeders are getting fed, whereas this may or may not be making it to the bottom, although most of it probably will. And just to show you, I'll take a pinch and we'll just kind of watch. And that's really the other thing too, is you really should just be watching and getting an idea of what they're doing in real time. So there's the food making its way. They had just eaten a cube of tube worm, and for the most part, they are not interested. There's a little excitement. They may just be making moves, but not necessarily eating. But a hungry tank, you'll see the whole tank basically darting for that. So they're only half interested at this moment. That neon, he did take that. But they're not, this is not a terribly hungry display. I wouldn't be surprised if half of that will make its way down to the bottom or more. And that was just a tiny pinch of what came out of here. And for the most part, they're not terribly hungry. And so, you know, if they're not hungry, then don't feed, right? If they're not going nuts, then don't feed. If you feel like enough of that didn't make it to the bottom, then you use your wafer to go to the bottom. You put the wafer in the front, and if you come back in a few hours and the wafer's still there, then, you know, you can go another good half day or longer until they might be ready for, you know, a meal. So really, you're, you know, the amount of food that fish actually consume is pretty low. And if you're going to overfeed, then make sure you have good filtration, good plants, and maybe some hungry bottom dwellers that could absorb between your shrimp and your snails and your bottom feeders, that you can really sort of absorb and overfeeding until you kind of get the idea that, hey, I might be overfeeding, you know. Yeah, so just to give you some perspective on what actually the fish are eating, and for you guys to customize your tray. And it's always a good idea to put your food in the cap rather than dump it over the tank, you know, because it's an enigma. First dump it in here, then dump it in the tank. I don't know how many of you have already had accidents where you did something a little over the top there, you know. And if you do that, try to get it out. If you accidentally dump too much food in, you should try to get it out, because that is the beginning of something potentially bad happening in the tank. Overfeeding is probably the source of whatever ailments might be taking place in your tank. All right, thank you for watching.